the right page as it pertains to ESSER funding. Um, because the money is federal funds, even though it comes through the Department of Education and then goes out to our partners and then they then subgrant them to you all, they still have to follow the same federal rules. So as we've been looking at our annual reports that have been coming in from our partners and speaking with different ones, we want to make sure that even the subgrantees heard directly from the department what they were expected to do and what are the requirements for managing federal funds. I have on the call with me today two of my team members, LaShondra DeBose and Emily Langston. They will be monitoring your chat box. So if you have any questions, um, be sure to put them in the chat. They'll either answer them for you there in the chat or save them for me, and we'll have a time at the end for some question and answers. However, if there's something that I say and you wanted to speak right then on that topic, please raise your hand and they will let me know that there's a question waiting if I don't recognize you right off. So without any further ado, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I have about 40 or so logged on, um, and we'll catch those others up if they come in a little bit later. For a moment, let me share my screen. Again, the purpose of this session is to provide an overview of the American Rescue Plan, which is the ARP that we are using to fund these programs under the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. So there are two different ways people call this money. It may be called ARP ESSER or ESSER 3. They are the same, but they're just used by different entities. A little bit about who we are. We are the Office of Emergency Programs. This office was set up in June of 2021 for the main purpose of just administering the relief funds that were coming down from the federal government. We manage all things ESSER on the state level, on the school level. We also have an arm of my office that manages the emergency assistance for non-public schools, and that it's EAMS funding, and we also manage that as well. We'll serve as the point of contact for school districts and state partners for all things ESSER. However, if you have any questions, your contact will be your contact there at your awarding agency. There were 3 pots of money that came through during the COVID pandemic. The first was ESSER 1 back in March of 2020. Those funds actually were ended on this past September, so all the ESSER 1 money has been spent or obligated. ESSER 2 was authorized in December of 2020, and those funds run through September 30th of 2023. And ARP ESSER funding, which is what many of you are funding through, was authorized in January of 2021, and those funds are through September 30th of 2024. The purpose of ESSER funding with the federal government was to assist with COVID and the pandemic, to either prevent, prepare for, or respond to the pandemic itself and its impact on social, emotional, and mental health and the academic needs of our students. So when you're thinking about what you're going to do in your programs you're implementing, this should always be your organization's basic guideline. When you're making purchases, especially, does this fall under COVID? Does this either prepare for, prevent, or respond to the COVID pandemic? Again, the performance periods, most of you are funded through ARP ESSER, so unless something is different from your partner who awarded those funds directly to you, the ESSER funds must be spent through September 30th of 2024. However, based on your contracts with your subgrantees, who are our subgrantees, your timeframe may be different, but ESSER funds in a whole have to be spent by September 30th of 2024. here's just a little basic information. We want to make sure again that everyone was in the know about federal funds and the best way to manage these federal funds. ESSER money came down as emergency funds with a whole different set of rules. So there are a lot of things that apply to most federal grants that may or may not apply to these ESSER funds. Keep in mind that this is more money than we've ever received here at the State Department of Education. This is the largest amount, cumulatively over $2.7 billion in funding has come over the past couple of years. We must keep account of every penny. The feds have told us the statement is not when there is if there is an audit, the statement is when there is an audit. So you can look for fiscal monitoring from the State Department of Education, as well as potential fiscal monitoring from the federal government. And we'll also be doing some monitoring of actual programs. Even though the money came to the South Carolina Department of Education and we are the awardee, because we made sub-grants to our partners and then they in turn made sub-grants to many of you, we're all in line for possible fiscal and programmatic monitoring. So just because the Department of Ed is the awardee does not mean that we will be the only ones that will be audited. There is a strong chance that if they audit us and one of our partners, they will also monitor the sub-grantees of those partners' funds. So again, we want to make sure that all folks who are receiving ARP funds adhere to all the funding requirements. So what we're going to do today is kind of go over what some of those requirements are, because I don't feel it's fair if we hold you accountable for things you're not completely aware of. That you have adequate internal control systems, that you have things in place to monitor your spending, to track your spending, payroll, taxes, all those kinds of things are in order, that you comply with all state laws, federal laws and regulations. You meet any performance measures that are set on to you by your awardee, your awarding organization, or that may be set on you by the Department of Ed, and that you meet those requirements on time. When spending the ARP funds, please make sure things are allocable, reasonable, and necessary. By allocable, we mean that it is in your budget, it's been approved, and you're paying for it in a fair way. Like, we don't want you, if you have $2 million to spend over the course of 2 years, we're not expecting you to spend all $2 million in the first year. That you're spending the money, throughout time in a reasonable fashion. That is reasonable, that it has sound business practices, that you're not paying an excessive cost for something, that when you're making purchases, that if you have to buy a computer, that one computer is $1,000 and one is $300, but they both do the same thing you need them to do. Why buy the $1,000 one when you can buy the $300 one? So that everything you're doing is reasonable and that it is necessary. Again, it's in the grant, it's been approved, and it is needed for you to meet the needs of your grant, of your program, and that they are allowable. The funny thing with ESSER is so much is allowable. It's hard to kind of say what is. It's easier for us to talk about what is not allowable. Some of the bigger things that we see a lot of coming through in our annual reporting: federal funds cannot pay for food. So if you're using your federal funds to buy food for students, for after school programs, for meetings with parents, for incentives, for anything, federal funds, these ESSER funds cannot pay for food. So the last line on the slide says, it does not mean you can't do it. It just means you can't pay for it with this money. So if you're having a program or a project and you have to have food, that has to either be maybe donated or pay for it from another funding source, because we cannot reimburse for food. So if you, as a sub-grantee of one of our partners, submits to your partner for reimbursement for food and they reimburse you, they cannot then in turn send that reimbursement to us to reimburse them for the food, because we will deny that claim. So what I would encourage our partners to do is, for ESSER funding, you guys also maintain the rule that we will not be reimbursing for food. We cannot pay incentives to parents or students, and no cash payments at all to students or guardians or others. We're not buying gaming equipment. We can't buy Xboxes and Wii's and those types of things for after school projects. No capital assets prior to approval, like buying a cars or improving HVAC, which I don't think many of your programs allow for that, but those types of things have to have prior approval from our office. And we do not purchase clothing. By clothing, we mean things such as maybe if you have a rec team in your after school program to buy their uniforms, we can't do that. A lot of times in programs, they want the kids to dress alike on a certain day or whatever. We can't buy those t-shirts. We can't do anything with clothing. So those are the things we see the most that come through that are not allowable. So keep those things in mind. Again, it doesn't mean you cannot do it. You just cannot do it with your ESSER funding. Maintaining documentation. This is one of the things we have seen a lot in our school districts as well that our auditing team has already found. So the next couple of slides we're going to talk about, even though you are not the original awardee that the Department of Ed is, and the Department of Ed then awarded funds to our partners, then our partners then awarded funds to you all, the subgrantees, does not exempt you from the same rules that the Department of Ed has to follow as the original awardee. So we ask that you maintain all expenditures, purchase orders, proof of purchases, cancel checks, all that good stuff. Anything that has to do with ESSER, we ask that you maintain it. And we also ask that you keep it on file for at least 7 years. Inventory control, we'll talk a little bit more about that. If there are things you're purchasing with ESSER funds, that you're tracking those purchases and where they are. I've also included in this a link to from our audit services about retaining documentation, and we will send a slide doc out to you, so you'll be able to go to this website to see what we will be expecting you guys to maintain. That you properly track your use of funds. You have an accounting system or something that you're reconciling your statements and you're making sure all the money is accounted for. Time and effort, we'll talk a little bit more about that, is being completed by anybody getting paid by ESSER funds, be it part-time or full-time. They have to do their time and effort paperwork, and make sure that you have a copy of your W-9 on file. Time and effort. This is one of the biggest problems we've seen in our awarding of these funds. Any person who's being paid in full or part-time by ESSER funds has to maintain a time and effort sheet. It can be your employee. We need a record of the employee timesheets. If they are an hourly employee, a personal activity report or a semi-annual certification, and that also have on file the full name and the position and the job title, a description that lists their duties, and a record of their wage agreements. If you have a letter that says you'll get paid X amount of dollars an hour or X amount for the year, that all that is on file somewhere in your office. Again, this is federal regulation that says we have to provide either certification or some type of activity report for all folks being paid with federal funds. So this is not a state law or state rule. This comes directly from Department of Education. And just go back to time and effort, I want to go over what that means. If you are working full-time, 100% paid from the ARP ESSER funds, then what you can do is call a semi-annual report. Let's see, semi-annual certification, which means every 6 months or so, you will complete something that says Tanya Mallett Smith has worked 100% on ARP ESSER activities for the South Carolina Department of Education from January 1st through June 30th. Then I will sign it and my direct supervisor will sign it. And I will do that both in June and December. If you are an hourly employee, then you should have a report monthly that shows if you worked an 8-hour day and 50% of your time is for ARP projects and 50% of your time is paid from other funding, that you would show, I worked from 2 to 3 today on ARP stuff, or 2 to to have 5 on this. So we'll show that at least over the course of the month, you have spent 50% of your time on ARPSR projects. That monthly report would then need to be signed by yourself, by the person doing the work, as well as their immediate supervisor. So those are things that you must have on file, because if we are audited, those are the things they're going to look for. They're going to look for the timesheets, either a personnel activity report or a semi-annual certification. You can also do a blanket certification if you have multiple employees. You can say employees A, B, C, and D all worked 100% of the time on ESSER from this period of time to this period of time. That will also be sufficient. Assets. For the sake of ARPSR, we're considering anything that's $100 or more as an asset. And technology, regardless of cost, is considered an asset. What that means is if you buy a camera and it costs $69 with ARPSR funds, we're still considering that an asset. If you buy a new desktop that costs $100 or $1,000, that also is an asset. Anything that could possibly walk away, like an iPad, iPad Pen, the small cameras you buy for your computers, any of those things are considered an asset. So what we ask that you do for anything purchased with ARPSR funds is you keep an inventory. That inventory should include the type, the asset type, or the brand. Just say you bought a Mac pencil, and the invoice date should be on there, as well as the invoice number, the vendor or the service provider, the serial number of the item, the purchase cost, and if you have multiple sites, which site that particular item is located. So if you're purchasing anything that is, except for consumables, we're not talking about workbooks and things such as that, but technology, and those types of things, make sure you keep a record of them and you have all that together. SAM.gov. It is required that any agency or entity that receives federal funds must have an up-to-date active SAM.gov registration and a unique entity identifier or UEI number. If you do not have those things, we advise you strongly to go out to SAM.gov and register. Registration is free. They'll ask you for some of your information about your entity. They will set that up, and what that does is that recognizes you as an entity that is free to receive federal money. So we're asking that if you are receiving any money from that is ARPSR, which is federal funds, that you go ahead and register for SAM.gov. I would, when that registration is completed, I would file that, you have one, and also send a copy of that to your who awarded you the funding, because we may even ask them if their subgrantees have this information. So as you get it, I would recommend you go ahead and send them the letter or the email that says you have an active SAM.gov, so that they will have that on file in case we ask them those questions, because the feds will probably ask us those questions about our partners. So we ask that you all go ahead and do that. And I believe in that process, if you do not have a UEI, they will assign one to you at that time. It is free. It doesn't cost you anything to do it. And just in case there's another pot of money that comes out or other federal funds you want to go after, this will make you eligible to go after funding on your own. Also, it's just for 1 year. You have to maintain your registration. So they will let you know, they'll send you an email about 30, 60 days before your renewal is due to remind you to renew. So you do not want that SAM registration to lapse. So if you do not have an active SAM.gov registration, please go to SAM.gov and sign up. If you do have SAM.gov registration, make sure it's active, or put in your calendar your renewal date so you will not let that registration lapse. Okay, that is all I have right now. Are there any questions in the chat, ladies, or does anyone have any question they'd like to ask?
We do have a few questions in the chat, Tanya.
Okay.
We got one that says, if you are a salaried employee, does the personnel activity report still apply? Are there cases where you have to submit a semi-annual certification and personnel activity report?
No, you would do one or the other. If you're salaried, like my team is, we do the semi-annual. So you would do one, we do one in June and December, I believe. So if you're salaried and you're 100%.
And we did
That
just have a comment about the SAM registration, that those are behind and registrations from the beginning of the grant period are still in progress.
right. There's a huge backlog with them because so many folks are applying now for that, but just get the process started.
And it looks like that's all the pending questions we had.
I see them
John
here.
and LaShondra have been helping answer some of them in the chat.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Does anyone want to raise their hand and ask a question directly? We'll be glad to take that at this time as well.
I think, did we answer, Ashley Brown had a question about contractors?
Yeah, I believe John answered that about the contractors, yes. And Ms. Gardner, no, we don't have a PAR template, not that I'm aware of. But you could probably, Google and use that as a guideline. I don't think we have one that we use, because again, my staff, we use the semi-annual reporting. Okay, Laura Washington has raised her hand. Can we free her to speak, please?
I've allowed those with their hands raised to unmute themselves.
Okay,
Great
Ms.
morning.
Washington.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Great morning. My question, do we have to reapply
Oh, I can barely hear you.
for this grant?
I can barely hear you. Repeat that again, please.
Would we have to reapply every year for this grant?
That would be, I'm not sure how your particular agency that is handling that, who sent the award to you, they may require that you apply every year. That would be a question directly for your funder.
Thank you.
Ms. Yin, did you have a question?
Yes, my question is that when the university professors work on this grant, and usually the university will document the equivalency of the course load and to the work that they put it to the ESSA grant. So in that case, what is the most effective way to document the hours? So they are not on a full-time payroll on the ESSA grant, and they are the full-time employee, but then they have to spend time to work on this grant. So are they going to document the hours or the equivalency of them, the course load? The university relieve them from doing this ESSA grant.
Right, so they can document the hours you spent. Do they have a certain amount of time they have to spend on ESSA, or they can document that on a PAR?
Usually the university, I'm not sure how they convert the hours to the course load. So when they budget, they say, well, this professor, every year the annual salary is this. And there are two different ways I noticed they budget. One is directly budget hours, the number of hours they work. Hours is specifically for the summer program, but the professors begin to work during the beginning of the school year to work toward and prepare for that summer session. So there are two different ways. One is I noticed that in one institution, they document the hours, the average hours for doing this work spread out from the beginning to the end of the summer session. This is, for example, 100 hours. But for other institutions, they said, well, we only coded it per course. They relieve them from teaching one course. So that's one course might be 12,000. per course. That's how much that professor is worth for teaching one course for the whole year. So
Yeah.
in that case, and based on the presentation, the findings you just shared, so how do we do the reporting?
It sounds like for that would still work better under a PAR or a blanket certificate from that professor that says they did this amount of work for ESSER, and then have their supervisor sign it. So that may, since they're doing the equivalent to a caseload, a blanket certificate may work best for them.
So you mean the certificate, and what do you
A
mean?
blank, like for them to say we worked, X amount of time this
Yeah.
year on, or this period of time on ARPS or projects, and then have them sign it and their professor and their immediate supervisor sign it.
So that supervisor is not necessarily the ones to oversee the project.
Now, whoever oversees that person, who would know what that person does every day.
Okay, so is their
Right.
institution's director supervisor. So
Exactly.
do we need to require them to log the time and hours?
They would need to make note of it. That's the only way they can probably keep track of it. If they're not doing it hourly like some of the other programs are, they would need to make note somewhere of how much time they're spending on ESSER
Yeah.
projects so that they can put that in their statement. Yes, ma'am.
So they can put it at probably average like 10 hours a week.
Or however they do, however they can document it. Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Okay, good. Thank you. Mhm.
Okay.
In the chat, we have a request for a PAR template or a semi-annual template. Is this something we could send with the recording and slides?
We don't have one here at the agency that I can think of, but we'll check. If we have one, then we'll send it. However, I know because I've done these before, you can Google PAR or Google for a semi-annual template, and there are lots of different ways you can do with it. But we don't have one that we're issuing as a part of ESSER. Whatever works best for your agency will be fine with us.
I know in our ESSER conference too, the auditing office had some templates, so maybe we can reach out to them as well.
Okay.
Do you know when the next funding cycle will begin? Would we need to reapply for POLE funding?
POLE funding. I'm not familiar with POLE funding. But for us, if you were awarded funds through your agency, their funding cycles may be different than how we're funding them. So any of those particular questions, if your funding is not coming directly from the Department of Ed, speak with the agency who your funding is coming from. They may have a different process than what we have.
Do we need to go back and track time and effort for year one that has already closed out?
If you used ESSER funds in year one, I would highly recommend you put something on file. Even if you can't go back and look at timesheets and get that information detailed, have some signatures that say we worked this amount of time, this amount was paid on file for that first year. Yes, we highly recommend that in case there is an audit.
And then the last question, please tell about reporting requirements for contractors.
For contractors, I'm not sure what you're meaning by contractors. Contractors to do like a service provider. Emily, could you unmute who asked that question maybe and see if they can explain what they're talking about?
Sure.
I think that was Miss Anne Marie.
Yes, should have mic capabilities now.
Yes, ma'am. Do you want to repeat your question or give a little bit more background on it? Make sure you unmute yourself on your mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. Our organization, Hugs for Horses Therapeutic Riding and Horse Powered Reading, contracts with the Georgetown Equestrian Center for the use of their horses and employees. So, and that's how we have
Right.
worked our funding in the past we contract at a certain rate per hour for their horses and their employees. So can you explain any specific requirements we may have?
Right. If those
Like-
employees if they're being paid with ESSER funds, then they
Yeah.
need to have a PAR to show what part of their work is done with ESSER funds and what part of work is done with their agency on other projects. So
Okay,
maybe like a monthly, what I've seen them folks do is they keep a monthly spreadsheet and put, we work this many hours on this and this many hours on that. And then at the end of the month, they submit that
Uh-huh.
with their signature to their supervisor, and then they sign that as well.
Tanya, if I could
Okay,
jump in
well, I
for
mean,
just a second, if they're
Sure.
contractors, they should not we don't need any time and effort documentation, just employees of the
I'm sorry.
actual organization.
just
I'm
what
sorry,
from
did you hear that?
I'm
Just
sorry, I didn't hear
employees
it.
of the actual organization. So employees that are actually from Hugs of Horses. If you're
Yes.
contracting with Georgetown Equestrian Club, we won't need time and effort for them.
Okay,
Thanks, John, for putting that up. I'm sorry, I misspoke.
that's good. I mean, that's helpful. I appreciate it.
We have a couple more questions. Which grant programs are funded directly through SCDE?
I don't think anyone on this call other than South Carolina Arts Commission, who else? First Steps, SEAA, maybe on the call. Those are funded directly from us. Everyone else is probably funded from our partners. So you may be getting a grant from a university, you may be getting a grant from SEA, South Carolina Arts Commission, then they are your funders. Most of you on this call do not have funds directly from Department of Ed. They are flowing through another entity to you. Here's a question: hiring people as a consultant, paying a visiting storyteller a flat fee to perform at a school. Those, I'm not sure what you're asking. Are you asking if those are allowable? Or if you need timesheets for those? Okay. Thank you. Okay. Are there any other questions or concerns?
I
Going
have another question.
Yes, ma'am.
And yeah, we have subgrantees, and the subgrantees, our program, when we oversee the program, we plan to have them evaluator to evaluate the effectiveness of all the programs. But our subgrantees, and some of them also hire the evaluator, so that will be considered as a contractor. So as to the payment for those contracting evaluator, is there a ceiling and a cap of the payment?
No, ma'am. Once for CHE, we have made the award to you. Long as you stay within the bounds of that award, those decisions are made with, in-house with you all.
Yeah, so
we've approved you to get an evaluator, but we did not approve a rate, as long as you don't go over your amount that was awarded.
okay, so do they need to submit the hours they work on the project?
Well, they will probably need to submit that to you all so that you guys can pay
Yeah.
them. Yeah,
Okay, good, thank you.
right.
I believe that's all the questions, Tanya.
Okay. And we will be sending out the slide deck as well as the recording once we get it ready. It takes a couple of days, but we'll send it out to everyone that signed up for the call today. If you have any direct questions, I recommend that you go again through your funder and then have them send. They may be able to answer those questions for you. If not, then they can contact my office for more clarification. But your first point of contact will always be your funder. Again, I just want to make sure that everyone who is receiving funding knew a little bit more about that and what we could and could not do with this funding based on some of the information we received in our annual reporting. We knew that we needed to get some more information out to the sub-grantees of our sub-grantees. And again, we appreciate all the hard work you're doing. This is some great work. We've seen some very exciting things, some very creative things folks are doing to work with children and in this area. So we again applaud you for your efforts, and we thank you for your time and your patience today. And we look forward to many great things coming out of all of your entities. If there is no more, I hope you have a great week, and thank you again for your participation. I'll hang just a moment or two in case there's some individual questions folks want to ask me specifically about their entity. If not, we will hope to see you all soon.